Well, most Americans thought they would never see the day come. Lawmakers in the state of Michigan, Motown, have moved with lightning speed to fight the unions and protect the rights of workers.
Michigan was one of the strongest union states in the country, and now unions there can no longer strong-arm workers into paying dues. As Dale Hurd reports, it's another sign that anti-union forces in the U.S. are gaining momentum.
Michigan Republicans acted so quickly that the unions had little time to react. Within hours of announcing their plans last Thursday, bills were rushed through the state Senate, and after a legally required 5-day waiting period, the House approved final passage Tuesday. Thousands of union members from across the state converged on the Capitol in Lansing. Teachers even called in sick, abandoning their students. There was violence. This YouTube video shows a supporter of the new law being punched by union members. Police had to resort to pepper spray to control the crowd. But the union intimidation wasn't enough. The Republican governor signed the law.
To have him, with a stroke of a pen, take our rights away is offensive.
Supporters call it right to work. Unions say it cuts their bargaining power. Less union dues means less influence.
These so-called right-to-work laws, they don't have to do with economics. They have everything to do with politics. What they're really talking about is giving you the right to work for less money.
But under right-to-work laws, workers get to take home more of their money because they prevent the unions from forcing non-union workers to pay dues. According to the Heritage Foundation, given a choice, about a quarter of Michigan government employees would opt out of unions, returning about $100 million a year to their pockets. Supporters also say the law encourages business. Chris Beckering owns a construction company and predicts the bill will allow his company to hire more workers.
This will attract more businesses to Michigan. Those businesses will need space, and we're here to build it for them.
The new laws deliver a huge blow to the labor movement in the heart of the U.S. auto industry. As hard as it is to believe today, Detroit was once a jewel. Many a Michigander will tell you that Detroit and the state were damaged in part by union power, increasing the cost of business and forcing companies to leave, eroding the tax base. Now Michigan will become the 24th right-to-work state, becoming one of a number of states that have successfully challenged the unions after Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker defeated them in Wisconsin and then survived a recall election. But the Michigan law is likely to be only the first act in a long political struggle as opponents fight the new law in court, the legislature, and the voting booth. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, you hear the debate on this, and there's so much misinformation. I live in a state that has had right to work forever. It is prospering. As a matter of fact, the states around the nation that have the highest GDP growth are those who are right to work, and those that have union shops have less, because the unions force people to be members. Whether you like it or not, you're going to have compulsory union membership. Right to work means that you can opt out of unions. So what does it do? Does it hurt the workers? No, but it certainly does hurt their leaders. And the ones who have this slush fund they can spend on political activity, often unchecked. And so it's amazing that in Michigan, the people recognize, at least the legislature recognized, and the courageous governor says, okay, that's into law. And but that is not anti-worker. We're all for workers. We're all for workers. And workers, you know, some years ago, they needed unions. Unions were important. Workers did not have the power they needed to have against entrenched interests. The corporations were huge, the trusts were huge, and the workers had little or no say. And so they organized. Men like John L. Lewis and the mine workers and others brought some semblance of decency to the laboring man, and they've done a good job. But at this stage in American history, union power is outmoded. We don't need, certainly, a union shop. And so congratulations. And by the way, when we're talking about Detroit, the failure rate among Detroit 7th or 8th graders in terms of reading is just appalling. So The schools in the inner cities have deteriorated dramatically. And Michigan, which is a bright, shining example of a progressive state, has fallen way, way behind the national average in terms of education, what I read just recently. So our hats are off to our friends in Michigan, and we wish you well in this adventure you have embarked on. Well, we have another important story out of Michigan today, but this one is about Sharia. Lee Webb has more from the CBN Newsroom.
That's right, Pat. Michigan lawmakers are working on a bill that could ban Sharia law in their state, and a Muslim activist group is fighting back. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR as it's known, is urging Governor Rick Snyder to veto any legislation that would block Islamic law. The Michigan House considered the bill Tuesday. The measure does not mention Islam, but it would prohibit the inclusion of any foreign laws that would undermine constitutional rights. At least 20 states are considering similar measures. A Christian college student has won an out-of-court settlement with the university that expelled her. Eastern Michigan University had kicked Julia Ward out of its master's degree program in counseling because of her opposition to homosexuality. She had asked her superiors to refer a gay client to someone else. Ward told professors her Christian faith prohibited her from affirming homosexual behavior. She filed a lawsuit against the school. A U.S. appeals court ruled in her favor. Now the school has settled the suit for $75,000. Her lawyer says her constitutionally protected rights have been vindicated, but there is no indication that she was reinstated in that master's program. The White House calls North Korea's latest long-range missile test highly provocative. The missile has the potential range to hit the U.S. mainland. Tuesday, North Korea announced the successful test of the Yuna-3 long-range rocket. That rocket traveled directly over Okinawa before falling 180 miles north of the Philippines. The regime says it fired the missile to test technology needed to place a satellite into orbit, but observers say it could be used to mount a nuclear warhead that could reach as far as California. Well, what if America had all the energy it needed and even became an energy exporter? It sounds too good to be true, but it just might happen. Ephraim Graham has that good news.
It has been a welcome sight for people trying to make ends meet in a depressed economy. Falling gas prices.
They're lowering. It's amazing.
AAA's prediction is that by Christmas, we should have prices of between $3.20 per gallon and $3.40 per gallon.
But in some areas, prices are already at the $3 mark. These prices could one day just be a bad memory.
I'm thrilled. I mean, I have to buy gas no matter what, so the fact that it costs a little bit less is definitely easy, especially now with like Christmas and everything coming up.
So, what's causing the sudden drop? Experts say prices typically come down this time of year. Some refinery problems have been fixed, and it can also be a sign of a bad economy when there is low demand from business. But what if prices came down and stayed down? Experts now believe North America may become a net energy exporter by 2030 because of a surge in oil and gas production, as well as improvements in energy efficiency. Not only that, the experts say the U.S. will become the world's largest exporter of oil, surpassing countries like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Iran. It's likely to be a gigantic change with geopolitical and economic consequences. What's behind the U.S. oil boom? New technologies like fracking are finding previously untapped reserves across the country.
This unconventional revolution in oil and natural gas is already having a big impact on the United States. It has created something like 1.7 million jobs in the last few years.
And cheaper energy is just what America's struggling economy needs. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
And Pat, what makes this even more astounding on the surface, it doesn't seem like they're getting any help from the federal government to do this.
Well, just the opposite. I think the government would like to stand in the way of the free enterprise system that is bringing this bonanza to play. And many states are forbidding fracking. You have to break these rocks. It's in the shale. In order to get the oil and gas out, it has to be broken up. And they have to have fractures. And if they don't have it, then, of course, we don't get the oil. So it's amazing techniques that involve horizontal drilling of as much as 2 miles, and then fracking, which is the pumping of a huge amount of sand. They call that a proppant, and then water on top of that, and together it releases these enormous quantities of oil. And it's amazing that we've had these shales here forever and haven't thought much about it. We've bypassed the shales and the drilling. But now, thanks to the creativity of a small oil company in I believe, Oklahoma, we've gotten these techniques. And you just hope and pray that the government won't stand in the way. But the environmentalists do everything to stop. Well, our water doesn't taste too good anymore and stuff like that. Well, we need the oil. We need lower-priced gasoline, and the fact that we'd be exporting oil is just undreamed of. It's a bonanza where we, the United States of America, would become the #1 producer of oil in the world. Hallelujah. Lee.
Pat, French Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault is criticizing those he calls the greedy rich for fleeing from high taxes in France. The London Telegraph reporting that he made the statement after famous French actor Gerard Depardieu moved to Belgium seeking lower taxes. Ayrault said, "We cannot fight poverty if those with the most, and sometimes with a lot, do not show solidarity." The president of France has announced he will tax those who earn more than 1 million euros a year at 75%. Pat, outside the confines of government, I believe they call that robbery.
Well, he would call it greed for those who want to keep hold of their money. I don't think that's greedy at all. If a guy comes with a gun and a mask, he's a robber. But if he comes in the guise of an IRS agent, then he's from the government. He's here to help you. But it's ridiculous to call those people greedy. They want to keep their money away from greedy tax collectors. And I'm all for it. But let me tell you, the greedy tax collectors are into your pocket. We've got this debate going on about taxes. Isn't it amazing? If you heard the debate in the TV, the talking heads, over the last 6-8 years, you've heard nothing but the Bush tax cuts for the rich. Have you heard that?
Absolutely.
Over and over again.
Over and over again.
Was there ever any talk that the Bush tax cuts were for anybody else? Just rich.
Correct.
It's the rich.
Yeah.
Tax cuts for the rich.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Obama and the Democrats in Congress are screaming now because the country may lose the Bush tax cuts for the middle class. They haven't said a word about it, and suddenly they are the defenders of the Bush tax cuts, but you'd never hear who put them into effect. That came about with the Republicans. George Bush, president, he had an across-the-board tax reform that amounted to $2,000 or more for a middle-income family, and tax relief, and the automatic extension of those things went through, and the 10 years is up, and this fiscal cliff will be the expiration of the Bush tax cuts unless somebody intervenes. But you don't hear the Democrats saying, we must fight to preserve the Bush tax cuts for the middle class. You never hear that. But the Republicans are evil because they won't take care of the tax cuts for the middle class that they put in over Democratic objection. This is politics, ladies and gentlemen. It sometimes makes you sick at your stomach.
America is now officially standing with a coalition of fighters opposing Syrian President Bashar Assad. That news came ahead of an international meeting on Syria today where 100 nations recognized the Syria coalition. France, Britain, and the Gulf nations have also unveiled measures to support the newly formed Syrian government. Still, world leaders are concerned that elements of the opposition may be affiliated with al-Qaeda terrorists in Iraq. The British government announced it will legalize gay marriage next year, but churches will be legally banned from conducting those ceremonies. Prime Minister David Cameron backs homosexual marriage, but he has stressed that there be a 100% guarantee that no church be forced to conduct the ceremonies. The Church of England and the Church of Wales were banned because of their strong opposition to gay marriage. Other religious organizations will have the opportunity to opt in in the future. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.